Who would I hire to be the offensive coordinator at Pitt if I was making a change? Who would I hire to be the head coach at Pitt if I was making a change? Who comes up with these questions? It's the readers at Panther-Lair.com, and we're going to answer those questions and more on today's mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to the end of the week. Welcome to Friday. It's the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. That means we do the mailbag. We take questions from the readers at Panther-Lair.com on our premium message board between 5th and Forbes. We take questions there and answer as many as we can here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. It's a nice little break from the regular, let's find 3 topics to talk about, and let's put quarterback in the headline and boost the views and the clickbait and all that kind of stuff. I like mixing it up a little bit, and every week we solicit questions from the fans, the Pitt fans on Panther-Lair.com. What do you want to talk about? And so they ask a bunch of questions. We got some good questions this week. We'll have some interesting conversations for sure. Of course, if you want to be part of the mailbag, if you want to submit a question for the mailbag, it's not going to be in the YouTube comments. It's not going to be on Twitter. It's going to be on the premium message board right there at Panther-Lair.com, where I think the best Pitt discussion is happening all day, every day. I mean, it's just ongoing. There's always good Pitt conversation happening on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We provide the content and the coverage of Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting, and then you can consume all that content and go talk about it on the message boards, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And, of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You get all of our Pitt video content. We've got these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday night. Me and Jim Hammett talk Pitt sports for an hour. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, our post-game shows, which are somewhat legendary, I would say. At this point, I think they're building a bit of a reputation for people. I think if you've been a part of one, you know that it's pretty fun, gets pretty lively for sure, and we're going to have one after the Virginia Tech game tomorrow night. I'm guessing around 11:30 or 12 o'clock we'll get started. We'll talk for an hour or however long we need to talk to fully flesh out all the conversation about the Virginia Tech game once that thing ends. So it'll be right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Now you might be saying to yourself, Chris, well, if you were saying it to yourself, you wouldn't address yourself as Chris unless your name is Chris. But you might say to me, Chris, how am I going to remember your live show? I'm going to be so caught up in the game, and I'm not even going to know what time it starts. And those are valid concerns. But if you subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then you turn on notifications, you'll get a little alert sent right to your phone, so you never have to worry about it. You'll get an alert when we go live. It'll be like, hey, Panther-Lair's going live right now. You want to tune in for the post-game show? So we'll do that for you. We'll take the guesswork out of it. You don't have to worry about what time we get started. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, we got to tell you about our friends at Homefield. Homefieldapparel.com is the place to go to get some of the best Pitt gear that you are going to find. And I've found very few people, maybe like one, who has ever actually complained or not even complained, but just not been over the moon about the designs at Homefield. If you haven't gone to check it out, go to homefieldapparel.com. Open another browser window. Don't close this browser. Open another browser window and go to homefieldapparel.com, because I assume you're all watching this through the browser and not the YouTube app. Go to homefieldapparel.com and look at some of their Pitt stuff. It's awesome. I mean, it's great classic designs. It's some of the best Pitt gear that you're going to find. High quality shirts. Like the material, the fabric is really high quality. It's really soft. It fits well. It holds its shape. And the designs are awesome. I mean, it's the coolest stuff that you're going to find. It's classic. It's instantly recognizable as Pitt. And you're going to like it. And they got a lot of stuff there. A lot of t-shirts, sweatshirts, bomber jackets, dad hats, joggers, all those kinds of things. Everything you could possibly want, it's right there at homefieldapparel.com. And if you go there now and you use the promo code LAIR23, LAIR23, one word, no spaces, LAIR, and then the numbers, 23, you're going to get 15% off your first order. So go to homefieldapparel.com, order some sweet Pitt stuff, and get 15% off your first order with the promo code LAIR23. All right, let's jump into the questions, see what you guys are talking about, what you're asking about today. Atwood409 starts it off with this. I know that sometimes Pitt losing is good for engagement and views for both the site and YouTube, but at what point do you become worried that Pitt losing would be bad for your business? Would a couple losing 4 and 8 seasons have you worried about people tuning out Pitt content? That's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of, and I have for 15 years more or more. I've thought a lot about what draws people to the site, what keeps people at the site, because there's really two sides of it on the business. If we're talking about the business of running a site like Panther-Lair.com, there's really two sides to it. One is, you know, gaining new subscribers, building up that number of subscribers and drawing new people to the site and getting new people to subscribe to the site. But then the other part of it is retention and making sure that the people you have stay with the site. And by and large, we've been really good at the retention side of it. It sort of grows slowly. Our growth maybe doesn't have the huge spikes that other sites have. We have steady year-to-year growth, but a big part of it is retention. And I think one of the reasons that we have really good retention, that we hold on to people, that people subscribe and they stay subscribed, is because of the community that's built up there. When I talk about the message boards, you think you just automatically assume the lowest common denominator, but the reality is there's a community element to it, and I think Pitt fans really enjoy commiserating with other Pitt fans, either sharing in their joy or sharing in their misery, and sometimes arguing about whether they should be happy or sad. I think Pitt fans really enjoy doing that together, and so you have, as a sports fan, and I always say this, you guys have probably heard me say this for years. As a sports fan, I mean, the number one thing you like to do the most is watch your favorite team. You want to hope that they win, but you like watching them the most. But the second most favorite thing to do is talk to other people about it. I mean, really, and hear talk about it and be involved in those conversations. That's the essence of sports talk radio, is conversations and discussions about your favorite team. And that's why message boards flourish. That's why this show exists, is to have those conversations about your favorite team. And because of that community, I think we've been able to survive and even flourish even when things got bad. There's an old saying that it's in terms of business for a site like ours, a subscription site, it's good if the team is either really good or really bad, because that'll drive people to the site to get involved in those conversations and drive the engagement that you're talking about. What you don't want to have is just sort of mediocrity, just not really very good, not really very bad, just kind of bleh. And we survived that. The site flourished, in the midst of going 6-6 3 years in a row in 2011, 12, and 13. No, 4 years in a row. 11, 12, 13, and 14. Going 6-6, and granted, you had two coaching changes, one after 2011 and one after 2014. But on the whole, those were some pretty mediocre bleh times, and basketball wasn't really all that engaging. There was a CBI year in there. And the site stayed strong, I think, because of that community of Pitt fans. And I don't mean to use this question as an advertisement for the site, but it is something that I've thought about a lot. The message board is a big part of it. The community is a big part of it. Long term, if they fall into some huge drought and go 4-8 and 3-9 over consecutive seasons, that's a situation I haven't really encountered since I started at Panther-Lair.com in 2005. We've seen some doldrums. They went 6-5 in 2005. They went 6-6 in 2006. They went 5-7 in 2007. We've seen some lows, but not really that low of 4-8, 3-9 in consecutive seasons or extended stretch of seasons. So I haven't really run across that. I think at some point there would be there'd be a dip, business-wise, there will be a dip that coincides with that. But I also think that you guys on Panther-Lair.com, you're kind of the die-hardiest of the diehards, if you will. You know what I mean? You're the people who are that committed to Pitt sports and that interested in Pitt sports that you're willing to support a site like this and be a member of a site like this. Quite frankly, you guys are among the chief people that Alliance 412 is hoping to connect with. When they want that message to get out that, to Pitt fans, you are not happy, You're probably not happy with what the team looks like so far this season. The way to directly impact that is to become a member of Alliance 412. I think Alliance 412, that's the message they want to get out there. Pitt's NIL collective. And the people they need to reach are the people on Panther-Lair.com, because they are, like I say, the die-hardiest of diehards. who are with the program through thick and thin. They're passionate enough that they want to be a part of a site like this, and I think they'll last and they would stay with a site like this for the most part, even through those doldrums, because it's still a big part of their Pitt fan experience. So, when do I get? When do I get concerned? I'm always concerned. I'm always thinking about what can we do to grow the site and add more subscribers and keep building it up. That's something I'm constantly thinking about. If they fell into a stretch like that, I think it would be tough. But I think, you guys are a resilient bunch. I do, and I think we would keep finding ways to make it interesting and engaging, to make it worth your time to spend to continue spending time on the site and being a member of Panther-Lair.com. Joe Law 12260 says, what's the plan for getting the offensive line to improve during the remainder of the season? Any reason for us to believe they can improve during the next couple of weeks? Yeah, I think one big part will be having the same lineup week to week, right? They've used 4 different starting lineups over the first 4 games, and that doesn't explain all of the issues that they've had, but it explains some of them. If they could get a little bit of consistency there, and I think they're going to be heading toward it, I think that would go a long way. Ryan Baer makes his first career start last week, plays more snaps than he has ever seen in his entire career last week. Ditto for Terrence Moore. That's a tricky situation. In addition to the fact that it's the 4th different starting lineup over the course of 4 games. They need a little consistency week to week. That group needs to build a little cohesion. With circumstances being what they are with injuries, I think you're going to, barring any further injuries, I think your tackles are pretty much locked in. It's going to be Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer. I think that Blake Zabovic is locked into a guard spot. The really interesting thing is going to be when Jake Cradle comes back and what they decide to do there. If it was me, and I'm certainly not the first person to propose this, and I know I'm not the only person that thinks it's an idea worth trying, I would probably keep Terrence Moore at center and put Jake Cradle back in at probably right guard, where he played before he moved to center in 2021 when Owen Drexel got hurt. I would probably go with that lineup. And left to right, I would go Branson Taylor, Blake Zabovic, Terrence Moore, Jake Cradle, and Ryan Baer. That's probably what I would do, and try to get some consistency with that unit. I'm guessing Cradle won't play this week, so I think you'll see the same 4 starters that you had, or same 5 starters, that you had against North Carolina, where they gave up 2 sacks. I thought they generally run blocked well. I thought that unit did okay. Particularly given the challenges that they were facing of 2 first-time starters and the 4th different starting lineup in 4 weeks. I thought they did okay, and I thought they showed some signs of promise, and I think they can get better. So if you see that group again out there tomorrow night, I would expect them to play a little bit better than they did against North Carolina, just from having some extra repetitions together. And then once Cradle comes back, you make a decision about whether you want to put him in. You basically make a decision about who fills out your 5 best offensive linemen. Is it Terrence Moore or Jason Collier? That's the decision you're making. Cradle's going back into the starting lineup when he comes back. Does he go in place of Moore or does he go in place of Collier? And so you have to decide about who fits better and who gives you a better chance to win. Like I said, I'm probably going to, if it was me, I would probably stick with Moore at center. I think he gives you a better option now, and I think he gives you that's good for the future because he's the center of the future. So that's what I would do. I would expect that unit to improve, though. I think they can keep getting better, and the biggest thing they can do is just keep practicing together and playing together, which hasn't been the case over the first 4 weeks when you've seen all the shuffling that they've done. Keeping up the offensive line conversation, 121 Rum asks, what are your feelings on Dave Borbley? The O-line is a major concern this year, but that can be partially attributed to injuries. Last season, they also started rough and ended up playing pretty well by the end while also dealing with injuries. I'm not sure how to feel about the job he's done as O-line coach and if Pitt should move on from him or not. I'm of the mind that he's done a pretty solid job. I think the offensive line has been pretty solid. 2021, I think the line was good. I don't think Kenny Pickett just covered up for a lot of warts. I think they played well that year. I think 2022, as you mentioned, they end up with a lot of injuries. They have all those offensive linemen coming back, and they never started a game together. You know what I mean? Whether Carter Warren was hurt or Gabe Hoy was hurt or Owen Drexel was hurt, they never started a game. All of those returning 60-year guys. Sorry, we get a little bit of a chaos here in the Panther-Lair studios sometimes. Hey, cut it out. But those guys never started a game together. And so Dave Borbely, I mean, that's a difficult situation to work with. And I thought by the end of the year, I mean, first of all, before they get to mid-season, they set a Pitt record for most rushing yards, single game rushing with Izzy Abanikanda against Virginia Tech last year. And a lot of that's Izzy. I mean, Izzy makes a lot of great plays. He turns 10 yards runs into 20-yard runs, 20 into 30, and et cetera, et cetera. But those guys were opening holes for him. I mean, those guys were doing a good job blocking. And I thought as the season went on, they kept getting better, and that's a credit to Borbely. I think you'll see something similar this year. I don't know if they'll set a new record for single-game rushing. I don't know if they'll be as good at the end of this year as they were at the end of last year. But I think you'll see, again, while dealing with some difficult injury situations, losing Ryan Jacoby, losing Mac and Salves, at least one game without Jake Cradle and potentially more, I think you'll see this unit play better by the end of the season than they did at the start. And again, that's going to be a credit to him as well. The question of whether he should move on at the end of the season is a different question altogether. He is getting older. He has been around for a long time. Could it be time to move on? I mean, for him personally and professionally, and for Pitt, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I think that could make some sense for that move to happen. But on the whole, I think he's done a fine job with the offensive line. Are they as deep and as talented as you would like to be? No, you probably are never going to have the depth that you want at offensive line. But on the whole, I think he's been a net positive. I guess I would put it that way. PGH Sun J 1325 says, say you were allowed to make hires for the Pitt football program. Scenario 1, you get to hire a new offensive coordinator for 2024. Can you throw out some early targets? Scenario 2, Pat is hired by Michigan State. Who are your targets to become the new head ball coach? Try to keep them relatively realistic, i.e. no Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, etc. New offensive coordinator for 2024. Let's say I make the hire. Who are my early targets? So, I mean, I'll say, first of all, I'm not, tuned in on all the hot commodities among offensive coordinators in college football. I think, we always end up recycling names, right? And so, one guy that I think you would look at and potentially consider would be like Joe Rudolph. And I just wanted to check out where he is. He's in his first year as the offensive line coach at Notre Dame. He's never been an offensive coordinator before, but he's been obviously a college football coach for, closing in on 20 years. He's had a lot of success. He's been around successful programs, and I think he probably fits the kind of philosophy that Pat Narduzzi would want. And we'll get to the philosophy question in a second. I think he's somebody probably to look at. I think he's somebody that Narduzzi has looked at before and considered. I think I think to some extent, I think he was hoping to try and hire him when he first got the job here, but Rudolph ended up following Paul Chryst to Wisconsin. Maybe he gives a guy like Paul Chryst a call. That's been bandied about on the message boards. I don't know if Paul Chryst would want to come back to Pittsburgh. I don't know if he would want to be an offensive coordinator in the ACC again, or if he wants to look for like SEC. What's he doing now? I forget where Paul Chryst is. I want to say he's like an analyst somewhere. Seems doing something like that. He's at Texas as an offensive analyst this year. So, I mean, that's kind of a waiting, it's like a purgatory job or a 1-year waiting period or something, and then you jump back into the fray. Who we looked at in the past? I think when Mark Whipple was hired, Narduzzi, I think, looked at Luke Getsy, former Pitt quarterback, current OC at the Chicago Bears. It's not going so hot there right now. Maybe he's available. Maybe he's a guy. And I know as I say some of these names, as I say Joe Rudolph, as I say Paul Chryst, and I don't even know if Narduzzi would go down that road, but I know you're probably thinking, oh God, more of these recycled names, these run heavy, pro style guys. Why do we keep doing this? And there's even Kenny Heisman 8 had another question here. Says, say Pitt goes 4-8 this year and Pat fires Cignetti. Do you think Pat will ever change his offensive philosophy? I mean, only to a certain extent. And I don't think, like, Jim Chaney to Matt Canada to Deshaun Watson to Mark Whipple to Frank Cignetti, there are distinctions there. There are changes among each guy. Those guys were not the same. And I think You can look at each of those hires and sort of see how they were a reaction to the previous hire. I think Canada is someone that Narduzzi knew and had worked with and had sort of a professional relationship with, which I think is something he valued after Jim Chaney's 1 year. Hiring Sean Watson is someone who would be loyal and then not huge philosophical changes. I mean, probably to some fault, because I think he tried to get Watson to do some of Canada's things, and that didn't really work out well. Watson to Whipple was clearly a move to try to emphasize the passing game and the development of the quarterback. And he said as much. I mean, when you talk about does Narduzzi ever change his offensive philosophy, I mean, yeah, he made the Whipple hire specifically to develop the quarterback and the passing game. And so there is that. And then when he hires Cignetti, it's not necessarily to get to a ground and pound, run the ball every time, but it is to try to get more balance in the offense after feeling like they didn't have balance. And not just that Narduzzi looked at Pitt's offense. This is such a common narrative. Pat Narduzzi looked at Pitt's offense under Mark Whipple, the offense that won an ACC championship, and said, I don't want to do that again. But yes and no. He looked at that offense. Well, he looked forward and said, what do I want our offense to be? And said, I want our offense to be more balanced. And he probably also looked at the fact that he wasn't going to have Kenny Pickett anymore. And without Kenny Pickett, or a player of that caliber, he needed to have a more balanced offense. They couldn't throw the ball in 2022 like they threw it in 2021 because they didn't have the quarterback who could handle that in 2022 like they did in 2021. And quite frankly, they didn't have the quarterback who could handle that in 2019, and they went 7-5. They really didn't have the quarterback who could handle it in 2020, although Pickett improved from 19 to 20 and got hurt and missed a bunch of time, and they ended up going 6-5. It's not like that offense was just amazing and set the world on fire for 3 years. It stunk in 2019, arguably, and maybe not arguably, the worst offense of the Pat Narduzzi era. And then in 2020, it only got marginally better. It was only in 2021, when Kenny Pickett was in his third year of working in that offensive system and had a first-year draft pick at wide receiver, that offense actually worked. Okay? It wasn't like Narduzzi looked at it and said, well, that was so great, I'm going away from that. Well, no. It's just that maybe it wasn't quite all that it was cracked up to be when you didn't have a first-round draft pick at quarterback and a first-round draft pick at wide receiver. And so what would Narduzzi look for in his next offense? Let's say they make a change. I think he, again, looks for someone who can call a balanced offense while also ideally being able to develop the quarterback and develop the passing game. Who is that? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not tuned in enough to know those hot popular names, but I could see some of those guys I just mentioned, because again, they're going to call a balanced offense that controls the ball and has effectively a ball control passing game is what it would be. I don't know what Joe Rudolph would end up being as a full-time offensive coordinator. We've never really seen him in that role. But I could see a Getsy. I could see a Rudolph. I could see a Christ or something like that. There's not going to be some drastic departure to a Mike Leach disciple running an air raid offense in here. It's I would bet dollars to donuts that's not going to happen. As to the second part of the question, who would I hire if Pat Narduzzi left for Michigan State? I don't know. What has Heather Lyke done? You know what I mean? Like, where has she gone for her coaches? She's found top assistant coaches. Is what she did with Jeff Capel. It's what she did with Mike Bell. It's what she did with Lance White. I guess Tory Verdi was the head coach at UMass or something like that. So, there's a bit of a departure there. But you basically have two routes you can go. You can hire the top up-and-coming G5 head coach, or you can go get a top coordinator. Maybe like a Jason Candle or somebody like that. I'm still sort of surprised that he is where he is. Or maybe I don't know. I saw PJ Fleck's name get thrown around for the Michigan State job. Maybe she goes and does something like that. I have no idea. I have no idea where Heather Lyke would look. The first thing that has to happen is Michigan State has to actually come calling. Kind of like with Heather Lyke and Ohio State. I look at those situations both the same. Like, Ohio State has to make the call. Before we can really even talk about who would replace Heather Lyke, Ohio State has to make the call and say, we want Heather Lyke. Before we talk about who could replace Pat Narduzzi, Michigan State has to make the call and say, we want Pat Narduzzi. Now, if either one of those schools makes those calls, then there might be something to talk about. But I don't know if there's any real clear indication that those schools are making those calls. Not yet, at least. We'll see. All right. Went a little long on this one. It's always good to do because that means we usually probably had some interesting topics to talk about. So I appreciate everybody who submitted the questions. If we didn't get to your question from this week's mailbag, we will get it in next week. We always try and wrap up from the previous week and get as many of the questions answered as we can. Speaking of answering questions, we're going to have a lot of them, I'm sure, a lot of comments and questions after the game tomorrow night. So make sure you tune in for the Panther-Lair post game right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com after the Virginia Tech game ends tomorrow night. Should be a lively one. We'll have a few drinks, we'll have a few talks, we'll have a few laughs, and maybe shed a few tears, but hopefully not. I think Pitt will come out of that game with a win. My prediction is 23-12. I think Pitt wins the game 23-12, and yes, that would mean that there are 7 field goals kicked. That's what I'm calling for. A 23-12 game, 7 field goals between the two teams. Pitt scores 2 touchdowns and gets 3 field goals. Virginia Tech kicks 4 field goals, and it's just as ugly as you imagine, but it doesn't matter because it goes in the win column. I said this to someone earlier, that I think it'll be good enough to win, but bad enough to keep the message boards humming with the same 4 threads for the next week. So, or actually 2 weeks because they're off next week, right? All right. Thanks again for all the questions. Thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you check out homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code LAIR23 to get 15% off your first order. And go to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe if you please. And that's it for the week. I hope you had a great week. I appreciate you watching these videos all week. We will check in with you tomorrow night at the live stream, the live post-game show. Looking forward to that. And then we'll be back on Monday with another Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.